Foreign policy rarely unfolds in neat moral categories. Instead, the U.S. must constantly balance its economic interests with national security imperatives. And this week revealed just how fraught that balance has become. The revelation that Washington quietly paused sanctions targeting China's Ministry of State Security, MSS, despite detailed intelligence about an extensive cyber-espionage program, has ignited a political firestorm. The issue is far more complex than one administration soft-pedaling Beijing. It exposes a deeper tension. Has the American government begun trading away its security leverage for the promise of short-term trade calm? In an era of intensifying U.S.-China competition, this scandal is not just a procedural controversy. It is a warning light on the dashboard of American strategy, showing where diplomatic optimism can collide with hard security reality. The leak that reframed the national conversation. The scandal's ignition point was a leak revealing that sanctions drafted to penalize the Chinese intelligence service for cyber intrusions, specifically the Salt Typhoon campaign, were abruptly frozen. The disclosure instantly shifted the narrative from a niche cyber policy debate to a national controversy. Reporters quickly confirmed the sanctions package had been prepared months earlier, yet remained unsigned. Inside diplomatic circles, this raised immediate questions. Who intervened? Why the delay? And what message does it send to Beijing? The leak didn't merely reveal an administrative choice. It exposed a political fault line inside the White House, where security hawks and economic pragmatists appear to be locked in an increasingly public struggle. Trade stability versus national security, a calculated gamble. For years, U.S.-China relations have walked a tightrope between confrontation and cooperation. The administration's defenders argue that suspending sanctions was a tactical move designed to prevent the collapse of a fragile trade détente. China, reportedly prepared to retaliate with new tariffs, has been signaling it wants economic calm, but only if Washington avoids punitive measures. Some officials see this as strategic patience, a way to secure market stability, restrain inflationary pressures, and keep tech supply chains predictable. But critics point out that economic stability cannot become a shield for adversaries engaging in espionage. If China believes commercial leverage can neutralize U.S. consequences, the long-term risks multiply. Cyber intrusions escalate, deterrence erodes, and geopolitical rivals learn that U.S. red lines are negotiable. Fallout from the hawks, the pushback begins. The internal reaction to the sanctions suspension has been volcanic. Security officials and several members of Congress argue the United States cannot credibly demand cyber restraint from allies or rivals while avoiding firm responses to breaches attributed to a top-tier adversary. Committees are already preparing subpoenas. Members on both sides of the aisle want clarity on who advised shelving the sanctions, what evidence the White House reviewed, why Congress wasn't briefed, how this aligns with the delayed national security strategy. This is not merely partisan theater. Lawmakers fear that the precedent, delaying sanctions to avoid upsetting Beijing, could become a structural weakness in U.S. policy. Salt Typhoon isn't merely a background detail. It is a suspected multi-year cyber operation targeting telecom networks, government infrastructure, and sensitive state-level systems. Cyber experts have warned that the breach attempted to map vulnerabilities. Some intelligence analysts believe this kind of mapping is not espionage for economic gain, but preparation for potential future disruptions. The challenge is attribution. Cyber operations rarely provide clean signatures, and intelligence agencies, though confident, often cannot publicly reveal classified evidence. This creates political vulnerability. How hard can the U.S. push when its proof cannot be fully disclosed? The scandal underscores the growing disconnect between the pace of cyber warfare and the slow, deliberative structure of diplomatic decision-making. Allies watch closely. The cost to U.S. credibility. International partners, especially those in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, view U.S. responses to China as signals. When Washington restrains itself, partners worry America will also hesitate to defend them during moments of coercion. Countries like Japan, Australia, Taiwan, and South Korea have faced aggressive cyber campaigns of their own. They rely on U.S. leadership to set standards for consequences. Yet, the sanctions pause suggests Washington is now selectively applying pressure, guided less by principle and more by economic timing. Markets reacted cautiously as well. Investors may welcome reduced tensions, but analysts warned that unresolved cyber vulnerabilities introduce long-term risk, especially for semiconductors, power grids, and satellite communication networks that depend on stable geopolitical conditions. Domestic political weaponization, a perfect storm. In Washington, nothing remains purely a foreign policy matter. Both parties immediately saw the scandal as political ammunition. Critics argue the administration is bending to corporate donors and special interests, wary of Chinese market retaliation. Supporters maintain the president is protecting American consumers from price shocks and business disruption. But the deeper issue is transparency. By delaying the national security strategy, reportedly to adjust its China language, the administration inadvertently amplified suspicion. Why change U.S. strategy documents at a moment when Beijing is escalating cyber operations? What message does this send to adversaries? Congressional hearings will not be gentle, nor will the presidential contenders who see a chance to accuse the White House of weakness on China. Strategic lessons: the danger of mixed signals. Foreign policy is, above all, communication. Every action or inaction sends a message. Pausing sanctions tells Beijing several things. Economic interdependence can soften U.S. resolve. Cyber aggression may not provoke immediate consequences. Washington is internally divided on how to confront China. The United States must now decide whether it wants to maintain a sanctions regime that deters hostile behavior, or whether it will allow tactical trade advantages to override long-term security needs. If sanctions are to remain a credible tool, the U.S. must show that they cannot be negotiated away or postponed indefinitely, especially in the face of documented cyber intrusions. A moment of reckoning for U.S. leadership. The sanctions scandal is more than a narrow policy dispute. It is a mirror reflecting the deeper struggle shaping 21st century geopolitics. The United States must decide whether its global leadership is built on predictability, deterrence, and principled responses, or on transactional flexibility that prioritizes short-term stability. America cannot deter rivals with blurred red lines, nor can it rally allies when its actions contradict its rhetoric on cyber norms and rule-based order. This controversy is a test not only of one sanctions package, but of U.S. strategic credibility itself. How Washington responds in the coming weeks, through congressional oversight, renewed sanctions clarity, or transparent communication with the public, will determine whether the pause was a tactical delay or a lasting strategic retreat. Either way, adversaries are watching, and they rarely miss signals.